Sorry, thank you for reminding. I just started the recording.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so to connect to Microsoft SQL Server, what did I do? Basically, I click on the Microsoft SQL Server option. Here I have to give the server name. That's my server name. It's installed on my local machine. So I'm trying to connect with Windows authentication. This is the preferred mode because rather than just a username and password, you not only give username, password, but also some more details like which domain you're logging in from, which domain you belong to, all those things. So this is more secure rather than username and password. Okay. So I will connect to my server using Windows authentication. Click OK. Now what it's going to show? Okay, it's connecting right now.
Well, I think recording is not started.
Recording already started. See here, this session is being recorded. Can you see that?
No, sure. Maybe it's my system fault.
Can you see this small tab that I opened right now? Basically on my right side of the screen. Basically, which will list all the um, basically all the attendees who are in this session right now and the chart. Can you see all these things?
No, sure.
No, no.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah, I think they hide that for you. Not a problem. So the session is started recording. Okay. Next, right now, this is the server that's I connected to. So under this server, so say this is the server that I connected to. So under the server, there are many databases. So I just clicked on opening the databases. One moment. So these are the different databases listed. Okay. So in the same way, in under databases, I have many databases listed. It will be the same. Okay. Now to connect to any database, I'll select the database. I selected AdventureWorks 2012. Okay, once I selected that, all the tables, the views, these are the views. That's my views. Okay, here I have list of stored procedures and new custom SQL option. Is everyone familiar with all of these terms? What is a table? What is a view? What is a stored procedure? What is new custom SQL? Is everyone familiar with this? Okay, so assuming you're familiar, I'm going further. Perfect. So let me connect to one of the tables. I would like to connect to employee table. So instead of me trying to search in this list by scrolling, what I can do, I can search it here. So employee. So here, this is the table name. So what's the three-prong name? AdventureWorks 2012 dot employee. Here it belongs to human resources schema. So I would like to connect to this one. To connect that, I can simply select and drag and drop, similar to our Excel option. Okay, awesome. Now, once I connect it to this, I'd also like to make a join to this table. What I'll do, select, drag and drop. Now, by default, inner join happens. And how is the on clause being decided? Basically, when they have the same name, business entity ID and business entity ID. Because they have the same name, the join was automatic. If that was not the case, then it would ask you to customize or give a different on clause. You can always select these options. These are the columns in my employee table. Okay, these are the columns in my employee department history. So to join, I can simply select which columns I have to between these two and also change these type. Okay, now here if you observe, we have four types of joins that we can select: inner, left, right, and full outer. Remember, for Excel, even in legacy connection, we did not have full outer. Full outer is possible for SQL based servers. Basically, for servers, it's possible. So I'll connect to that. Say I make a left join. What does left join do? It will select everything from employee and it will select only common records from employee department history. Okay, includes all values in left table and all matches from the right table. Members without matches will show up as nulls on the right. Okay. One thing you have to note is that, say this is table 1, okay, and this is table 2. Now a left join between table 1 and table 2, let me write it. A left join between table 1 and table 2 is same as a right join between table 2 and table 1. Clear? Awesome. So this is very important. This is important because in some of the databases, you cannot do a right join. Okay. So in instances like that, what you will do, you'll basically put the second table initially and then use that to make a right join. Okay. Awesome. So that is the reason right and left are important. So in some databases, you cannot do right joins and also full outer. Sorry, right joins. My mistake. So in cases like that, we basically interchange our tables to get that. Now, till here you understood. After this, click on update now to see a preview of your data. So now this is number, this is number. Sorry, this is string, number. We can always observe it from here. Okay. Here we have which table it is coming from. Say for example, you would like to join one more table to employee department history. What should you do? Say I would like to join department table. Okay, this one. I'll select, drag and drop it. Now by default, it happens to the primary table. Okay. Now if I think that's not correct, okay, what I'll do, I'll select here, click here. So I'll select from another table. Okay. Did you see that? By default, let me remove this. Department, when I drag and drop it, department joins to the initial table. Okay. If you don't want this to happen, but you want a join between department and employee department history to happen, what you'll do, you'll click on this icon here, which data source you will select. So basically, now to happen a join between employee department history and your department, you'll select a column from employee department history and department. Now because you joined from employee department history with the department, okay, that's why the join is depicted this way. Say you want to create a join between employee and department directly. What you'll do, you'll select it here. So say like this, modified date, modified date. Now because the join is between these two tables directly, it's depicted this way. The join was between this and then this. Oops, sorry. Yeah, this is a correct one. Department ID with department ID of department. Now click on update now. Okay, there is data in the here. So I'm having information from department table, employee table, and also employee department history table. Okay. Is everyone clear on this? You're all unmuted. You just have to unmute yourself and speak up. Awesome. Assuming everyone's familiar in this, we'll go to the next one. So till here you have understood. Now to generate custom SQL out of this, what will we do? Data, convert to custom SQL. The use of this thing, convert to custom SQL, is that you basically have a layout. You can simply edit that instead of creating or starting from the scratch. You can simply edit it from here. Okay, that is the reason I always try to convert to custom SQL. If you don't want it like this, you can always select new custom SQL and you can drag and drop it. So here you can write whatever you want. Select asterisk from employee. I can select it like that. Okay. Now when I said asterisk, okay, there's department ID and I want to join this with say login ID. Okay. Now this might be a wrong join, but still I'm able to do a join here. Okay. I just removed that. If you want to remove everything, right, what you can do, you can select the first table, click remove. Everything will be removed. Awesome. Sorry. Perfect. So this is how I wanted it to happen. That's present as is. These are the columns similar to what we had. We can also use stored procedures. What are stored procedures? Stored procedures are nothing but saved queries. Okay. So instead of creating this all the time or creating this join, then placing where clauses, all those things, what you can do, you can write that query simply and save it on your server. So you can use that query all the time. The advantages, basically, can someone help me out in the advantages of a stored procedure? What are the advantages of using a stored procedure? Why do companies use stored procedures?
We can reuse that at any time. Depends on the
Perfect.
code irrespective
Yes.
of projects.
Perfect. Awesome. We can reuse it. In fact, even in the same project, if we want to have, if we want to use it multiple times,
So instead of every time going back to the code, do something and come over here, run it. So instead, what we're gonna do is we keep on writing the code. So once we
yeah, go ahead. You have muted yourself, Sriharsha.
To build a powerful
that's the only way it's useful.
database.
Okay.
More questions,
And
guys?
another thing is security. Okay.
Questions?
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. So basically, let me say once again. So the biggest advantage of using a stored procedure is that first thing, if you have a piece of code that is uniform across different platforms, okay, or different servers, you can use that. So change the code in one server and you can simply execute that code. You can simply call that code. You're not writing the whole actual code here. Okay. Something like if you need to call me, okay, you don't need to mention Shiva specifically. You can say me in many places. Okay. Just like a pronoun, like an alias, we can use a stored procedure. The other advantage is that, say, okay, you have a query right now. In the future, you have to put a where clause. You basically have to make many changes. You don't want to leave many versions of it lying around, right? I might use one version, you might use one version, and both of us will be in conflict all the time. So instead of that to happen, we can simply save that query in a central repository or on the server, and we can use that multiple times. That's one other advantage. The next advantage is, say you have a logic, okay? You don't want to show your logic to the other person. You want them to use it, but you don't want the others to know the logic. So for example, say Windows. we are using Windows, but we don't know the logic behind Windows. Okay, that's one of the examples of a stored procedure. So basically, if someone wants to hide something, they can use stored procedure and do it. The other thing, another type of security is, for example, just a moment, let me remove few columns from here. Okay, so imagine my table has these 6 columns. Okay, now I don't want to give you modified date, but if I give you this stored procedure, sorry, if I give you this table, you can see the modified date also. I don't want to give that to you. So what I can do, basically I can write the query, something like select business entity ID, department ID, shift ID, start date, end date from employee department history table, and save it as a stored procedure, and I can ask you to use that stored procedure. The advantage of this is that sometimes, say in the future, I want to give you access to the modified date, but I want to restrict access to end date. So I can simply modify that query that I gave you or the stored procedure, and you can keep on using it. Okay? Everyone clear on this? Advantages of stored procedure?
Yes, Shiva. Shiva, I have a question here as you brought this point. So if if you are working on same server, let's say you have a proc, and if you want to see the code of that proc, can we do that? Like in my projects, how we proc?
No. You cannot do that. You need access for that. So department EMP I have bought in. Okay. Now I can only remove it. I cannot edit it. To edit, I have to go back to the stored procedure on the server. Okay. So to edit data source. Okay. Now I cannot edit directly from here. This is one of the advantages of here. I have basically established the security of you not able to find the logic. Okay. Clear?
Yes, Shiva, I got it. But I'm asking if you have an access, how to view or edit, and we can move that to production, right? Sometimes
Sorry,
if
I did
somebody
not
came,
understand. I did not
sometimes,
understand.
yeah, let's say you have a proc in production,
Okay.
and someone asks us to modify that proc
Mhm.
and move that new proc to production. So to do that, how can we view or edit that proc?
You have to go to the server. So you have to go here to edit it. You cannot do it directly from Tableau. So if you are in the server, what you can do, so for example, let's see, I'll try to find the stored procedure that I just used. Okay. So this is the stored procedure that I used. Click on modify. Okay. Okay. So this is the stored procedure for that. Okay. Now
Yes, Shiva.
see
Yeah,
here,
now I
I
got it.
have these 6 columns. So if I need to say remove few columns, okay, I'm removing these 2 columns. I can save this query right now. Okay. And once I refresh it on my Tableau, it will be reflected over there. Okay.
Yes, Shiva.
Clear?
Yes, Shiva.
But Shiva,
So in real time, we'll be doing that, or only admin people will be working on that?
Which one? Modification
Like
of the
change.
query?
Yeah.
Okay. So most of the times modification of the query means as a Tableau developer, you will also have some access to your server, okay, database server. So sometimes you have to write your own queries. So they will give you access, but may not give you access for alteration or modifying stored procedures on production server. Okay, they might give you access on dev, QA, or UAT or whatever, but not on prod. Okay.
so, so Shiva, in such cases, we have to work closely with the DB folks to make those enhancements in the stored procedures.
Sometimes, like for example, in my company,
Mm-hmm.
there's no direct access for DB folks also onto prod server. They have to go
Yeah.
through IT.
Yeah. So my understanding is Tableau, as a Tableau developer, it is always the read access to the databases, right?
Yeah, most of no. Not just read access. You can write, but read access to prod.
Yeah.
Write access means I can write on my tables. I can write, create stored procedures. I can delete tables. All those things I can do on my dev or UAT or QA. All those servers. Okay. I will have write access except on prod. Okay.
So when you make a enhancement in, let's say, in QA or dev,
Yeah.
the DB folks to get it deployed to production?
Yeah. You can open a ticket with your DB folks, right?
Yeah.
So that, yeah, so that they'll move that to production.
Yeah, again, it depends on the settings of the different teams. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely true. Okay, is everyone else clear on this one? Stored procedure, why stored procedure, what are the advantages? So one thing that we did not cover is in stored procedure, the performance will be better rather than issuing the query directly. So if you have a query that you're trying to repeat many times, okay, then what happens? Basically, SQL Server tries to find the best path. So for example, if you need to go from Chicago to Atlanta, you can go in many ways. It has to find the better way, right? So in the same way, SQL Server also tries to approach your query in a similar way. So that path is known as execution plan. Read about this. This can be useful while you're taking interviews. You can like talk a little bit about execution plan. This will be important. What are the advantages of execution plan? What are the disadvantages of knowing? Basically, this is the place where this is the place where your server is spending what amount of time or what amount of processing to perform your query. Okay, are you clear? So for example, say I write a query, select top 10 asterisks from employee. What does this do? Can someone help me out? What does this, oops, sorry, what does this do? What will this query get me? Anyone?
Top the
Sorry?
it shows the top 10 employees.
Top 10 records,
Yeah,
top 10 rows, okay? Not columns, top 10 rows
rows.
from employee table, okay?
Yeah, Shiva. Yeah,
Sorry?
it gives you the exclusive top 10 entries, so that which you can do an execution plan. That's what my understanding is. Is that right?
Yes, perfect. One moment. Okay, so now you know that it's trying to pull some 10 records from this employee, right? So what it will do, basically, it will try to find this employee table. Now it will try to limit itself from 10 rows, right? So this is an execution plan. Basically, I have to find the employee table first. Now out of that list, I have to get results, and that result should be limited to 10 rows. So this plan, SQL Server has to know, right? For a stored procedure, what it will do is, the first time it will try to find the best possible path. After that, it will save the path for you. So it doesn't need to spend time to find the optimized path. Okay, for example, say you need to cook a dish. Okay, say cake. So if you need to cook the cake, you need the recipe. You need the recipe. You need the ingredients. So if you're trying to execute it as a query, imagine it's something like you're trying to look up the recipe each and every single time. But if it's a stored procedure, you already remember the recipe. Recipe is remembered, so you don't need to spend time here. You just need to cook your ingredients. Okay? Is everyone clear on this? So try to read a little bit more on execution plan. This is very important, guys. Not a lot of people talk about this. So this will be an additional I don't know, like additional point that only you know and you can say about. Okay? This will be helpful in your interviews. Execution plan. Okay? Or we can also call it query execution plan. Execution plan or query execution plan. Okay? Awesome. Next one. Now that we are clear on using a stored procedure, using custom SQL, using tables, server, databases, all of these, right? Similarly, all the other features on this page, basically live extract connections, filters, all the columns, previews, metadata, everything is similar to the way we did in Excel. Okay? There's no other difference. So that's why you're clear in this connecting to SQL Server part, right? So in this one, you're clear on this point 10.
Can you explain once again by using stored procedure? Like that
Okay,
example.
stored procedure, simply imagine stored procedure just like a table. Okay, so what is the advantages of it? What is the advantage of a stored procedure? We have already talked about stored procedure advantages. Okay, so if you have questions, we can discuss that after at the end of our session. Okay, what are the advantages of stored procedures? So your stored procedure can give you a result, right? So that result can be used in Tableau. Instead of writing the query, you can simply use your stored procedure, okay, as your input. The advantage of this is that as your stored procedure gets modified, your Tableau results set also gets modified. Not just the data in the table, but also the view itself. Awesome. That's the most important part. Okay. So here we have a list of tables. These are all the tables. And those that starts with the letter V are my views. So all the tables and views are shown here. So you can either select a table, you can select a view, you can select stored procedures, you can use custom SQL option. Okay. Raven asked, there are views. How we see the views in Tableau? So similar to tables, we can see the views in here itself. Okay, Raven? Awesome. Also, guys, it would be great if you can look up what is the difference between a table and a view. Okay, what is the difference between table and view? If you did not understand, we can discuss this tomorrow. What is table and view? I can also show you an example of query execution plan tomorrow or after class today. Awesome. Next thing, so let me remove this. So I'd like to connect to my Excel. I don't want to connect to SQL Server because there's not a lot of data with me in SQL Server. Okay, in this I'd like to connect to orders worksheet. Go to sheet. Let me remove this earlier connection. Okay, so these are my different field values. Okay, let me edit this a little bit. and name it just orders. Now that we are clear on the connecting to Microsoft SQL Server database, it's similar to other databases also, okay? Now that we are clear to this point, we'll see editing data connections and data sources. These topics: edit data source filters, and also change the column values. We have seen this point, right? Did we see the edit data source? Basically, editing the data source means, so for example, clicking here, number decimal. So by doing that, you have edited the data source. Now remember, you're not actually editing the data on your data source. You're basically editing the result that's coming from your data source. So there is no modification to the real values. We have seen data source filters. What are data source filters? Click on add. So these are the places we call data source filters. To add a data source filter, these are, like if you select something from here, this becomes a data source filter. Okay, awesome. And also change the column values. What do I mean by changing the column values? Basically using alias. So for example, if you want to see secondary class, always wherever second class is there, right click here, use alias. From second class, I'm going to write secondary class. Okay. Now wherever second class is written, it will be shown as secondary class. That's called alias. Or in this instance, change the column values. Next, replace the data source and make it a primary data source for the worksheet. So before I talk about this, let's talk about what is a primary data source and what are the other types of data sources. Okay. So till now, we have been dealing with only one data source. There is only one data source, right? What happens if I have one more data source? Connect, new data source, Excel. So say I'll take one more data source. This one. This one, it has the same data. Sample orders. Okay, this is what I'm writing. Okay. Orders, sample orders. It's the same column structure. You'll understand in a moment why I'm doing that. Okay. So let's say I'll talk about an instance. For example, you went to your company and you have to do some ad hoc analysis or something like. So where do you do all of your development? You do it in dev server. Why dev server? Dev server mainly will have less data compared to your prod server or live connection. Instead of live, you are using an alias. So in the same way here also, instead of doing it on the live connection or actual data, you take some sample data. Okay. Now on this sample data, you can generate all the dashboards that you want. So for example, say I've generated a dashboard. Sales by color. Oh no, say profit by color. Now I'm coloring this based on profit. Now that I have developed this dashboard, I would like to use this on my actual data source, right? Or on my live data source or prod data source. So what should I do? Basically, I have to replace this data connection to my live connection. So in this instance, this one, orders, is my actual data source, and sample orders, okay, sample orders is my ad hoc data source or dev data source. So to convert between two data sources, what I'll do right click and then replace data source. Now what is there? Currently I'm using sample orders, and replacement will be orders. So here sample orders and orders. So whichever worksheets are using this data source, right? they will be moved to orders data source. So if I click OK, see what happens to your visualization. Okay, right now the data that I'm using is coming from orders data source. How do I know that? Because of this blue tick right next to my data source. Okay, clear? Are you clear on the idea? Oops, did I mute you? No. Okay, is everyone clear on the idea? Why do I need to replace a data source? Okay, how many of you want me to repeat?
You can repeat once more.
Okay, so the basic idea is you need to replace your data source. So for example, you generated all your dashboard, everything you did on your dev server. Okay, now you need to do testing, right? So you have to move it to UAT server. So to do that, what will you do? You basically will connect that new server here, and once you do that, you right click on replace data source, and right now it's using orders, and the replacement is sample orders. If I need to replace, click OK. So now all the data that's coming to this is coming from sample orders. Okay, earlier the data was coming from orders, or let me rename this as data source 1. This is my data source 1. This is my data source 2. Okay, now I have two data sources. So currently I'm getting data from data source 2. How do I know that? You see this blue tick next to that? That means the data is coming from here. Now if I need to replace a data source, what should I do? Right click on this replace data source. Now all the data sources will be listed here. So currently what am I using? Data source 2, right? So to replace data source 2, so that means this is old, this will be new. To do that, what will I do? Click on whatever I need to make selections. I have to make the selections here. Once I do that, click OK. Done. That's all. Now that I did that, so all the data is coming from here, data source 1. How do I know that? Because the blue tick is next to this cylinder, okay, or next to this data source. Okay, clear? Okay, quick question. How do you know data is coming from which data source? Basically, in this one,
Blue tick.
perfect. Can you give a name for that? What is it right now?
Data source 1.
Perfect. So right now, data source 1 is where I'm getting the information from. So if I need to replace the data source, what should I do?
Click on
Replace
replace
the
data
data
source.
source.
Next step. So and so date for date so and so what the so and so was has been dated.
Wanted to
So and so
summarize
description.
what you said.
So and so description is a HTML. So and so description for HTML for this HTML page. So that's about few times.
Perfect. I have muted you, Sriharsha. Yes, Sarita, you're saying something?
So are you trying to explain us that when you do your development against development data that is less in quantity, and then trying to make sure how does the look and feel is against the production data
Yeah, I
by
can also
making
do that with this.
by replacing the data source here?
Yes.
Again, this is all is happening in the local machine. For us to really deploy it into the production, we need the admin to do that, or the developer does that.
No. See, here
No,
you're just seeing the dashboards
yes.
with
And then
production data. You're not
yes,
publishing or to You're not publishing it onto production server. There is a little bit of difference here. So for example,
Yes.
if you need to run a query, okay, with your production data, you can simply run the query. But if you
Right.
want to modify your current stored proc to the new query that you're writing, then you need all the new permissions, all those things, right? So
Yes.
that's in the similar way. What I'm doing right now is I just converted the data source so that I can get a look and feel of how it's going to look like. Are my graphics correct or not? Okay. So
Okay.
now if I'm clear, then I can publish this onto my server by clicking here. First, I have to sign into my server. After that, I can click on publish workbook. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yep.
Sure.
Any other
What about
questions?
QA? What about QA? Like before moving to production, how we will do
Any
QA?
server, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is my point is to make on how to change the data source. It doesn't matter if it's QA or prod in this instance. Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Shiva?
Yeah, Sharon.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can ask this, but do we have any scenarios where some of the data sources are full? I mean, if the
What do you
data
mean
is,
full?
I mean, with the memory?
Generally, we don't do that. Okay, but what's your question? What is your question?
I mean, if the data source is full, I mean, it doesn't take any more further data. Let's say it is full with memory.
Okay.
So does that happen anytime?
Generally, your database admins will try to not try to steer away from that.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll at least leave maybe like for smaller databases like SQL Server, they leave like 2 or 3 GB space out of it. In fact, like my SQL Server has around 500 GB space left for it for my production server.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So it depends on the person's server, or it
Yeah.
depends on. Okay.
Hmm,
Thank you.
awesome. So that is how we replace our data. Okay. I have also given you a scenario where you might need to replace the data. Okay. Now we have seen only one data source till now, right? But generally, okay, in most of the companies, your data will not come from just one place. So for example, let's see. Uh, 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 Let me replace this for a moment. Okay. No, I don't like this. Okay, awesome. Now in this one, not all of the times my data is going to come from one data source. For example, say the latitude and longitude right now in this case are generated by Tableau easily. Sometimes you have to give the latitude and longitude. That's one case. Or sometimes you have to get data that belongs to, say, Excel. You need to consume that. So what will you do? The number of data sources that you use will be more than one in most of the instances. Okay, in most of your production servers, your data will not be from just one place. Remember that. So what happens in instances like that? How should I get information from more than one place? So for that reason, we use something called data blending. Now, before I go into data blending, I'm just going to say something like give a concept of primary data source and secondary data source. So right now, my information mainly is coming from this one, right? That means the data that I'm pulling for this worksheet, the first data, okay? First row or first column or first label, whichever is the first one, that I'm pulling information to this worksheet is called a primary data source. And anything after that is called a secondary data source. For example, in this data source, I need to get profit information on label. Okay, so this is the profit information from data source 2. This is not the profit information from data source 1. I'm going to list profit information. The one below, out of these two numbers, the one below is my primary data source, profit. The one on the above here, 1629 in this case, is from my secondary data source. Okay. Now, how am I pulling that? We're going to discuss that. But are you clear on the concept of a primary and secondary data source?
How are you differentiating that
Okay,
1629 is?
perfect. So here, whichever information is from the secondary data source will have this blue tick next to it. Sorry, orange tick next to it. The blue tick is your primary. We just talked about that, right? Now, if you see here, the secondary has an orange tick next to it. So
Right.
whenever you pull information, if it's from secondary data source, it's going to display this orange tick next to it. So for example, if you observe here, in this one, sum of profit, there is an orange tick next to it with a cylinder icon, right? That means it's from the secondary data source. Okay. Raven asked
Yeah.
me, how do we know which one is primary? Raven, the one with the blue tick, right? That's the primary data source. Okay, on the map, basically Raven asked, on the map, how do I know, for example, in this one, how do I know 33,403 is from primary and 1629 is from secondary? So right now, one is above and one is below, right? So if you observe in these two, okay, the one above has an orange tick next to it. The one below does not have anything. That means if it does not have anything, that means it's coming from primary data source. If it has an orange tick, that means it's coming from secondary data source. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's why I know 1629, which is on the top, is from my secondary data source, and the one below, which is 33403, is from my primary data source. Okay? Clear, Revan?
Shiva, can you swap that?
Okay. Now this is my primary.
Yeah.
That's why it's listed 33403 on the top. Okay, awesome. Perfect. Any other questions, guys, in this one? Now, tomorrow we'll discuss how am I making this data blending, what are the basics for this, all these things. But one point, last point that I'd like to cover for the day is, say there is a third data source, okay? For example, let me connect a new data source, Excel. Okay, sample superstore. I'm connecting to this one, open. Orders. Okay, now this one is my primary, blue tick. This is my secondary. Now what should I call this one? This is also called as secondary. This is not tertiary. This is not a third data source. If I get information from this one, this is also called a secondary data source. The reason why it's called secondary data source is that all the relations happen to the primary data source. Okay. For example, in the earlier case or earlier scenario, let me edit this. Remember, it's something like now orders and people they have a join, and orders and returns they have a join right now. Similarly, So this is your primary, this is your secondary, this is your primary, this is your secondary. All the connections will happen to your primary data source. Okay, in the data blend, all the connections will happen to your primary data source. For example, if I need to color from my orders, the region, color it. Okay, now I am coloring it, this color, I am getting it based on the secondary data source, which is orders sample superstore. I am getting profit from this one, data source 2, and primary data source is data source 1. Okay, now it's a little bit hard to understand, definitely understand that. Okay, but we can explore more on this tomorrow. Okay, awesome. Any other questions, guys?
What is the main purpose of this one?
Which one?
Like connecting to multiple data sources.
Okay, so the idea is that your data will not always be from one data source. For example, in my case, I work with suppliers. Okay, that means you know the vendors, right? Basically, they supply some food material to all the restaurants. So I work in a supply chain management industry. So each supplier will send information to me. So some of them will send me information in SQL Server files, as a SQL Server backup files. Some of them will send as a flat file. Some of them will send me as an Excel file. So I have to be able to work with multiple files on the same dashboard. So for example, to get the total sales from all the suppliers, I should add the sales of my SQL Server. I should add the sum of sales of my Excel, sum of sales of my flat files, all these things, right? So here I'm utilizing not just one data source, but multiple data sources. Clear?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, awesome. Any other questions?
Hi Shiva.
Hi.
Shiva, do you need any like a Unix like that in this one in Tableau?
No, you don't need Unix.
Or we don't need it, right?
You don't need Unix.
Oh, okay. And the second thing is like we will have the separate repositories for the testing and development.
It depends upon your company.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
In my place, they had like in one of the companies that I worked, they have basically had each server for each of them. So basically, I had one dev server, I had one
Okay,
QA server, I had
okay.
one more test server, one more UAT, and then finally prod.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Thank you,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions, guys? Where can we get Microsoft SQL? Is it free server in my system? So you can get Microsoft SQL Server from, basically it's free. You can search for that. So these are your different servers, say 2014 if you would like to install. Open that. Oops, sorry. I guess I clicked on something else. One moment. Okay. Okay, click to register, download and install. Once I sign in, it's a free account, okay? You can create a free account and then log in and then download, okay? Or you can do it from here also. So say right now I am using SQL Server 2008, okay? I'll click that, open this. click on this download link. Any versions of the SQL Server Express you can download and install it. Installation is simple. Okay? Awesome. Any other questions, guys? Perfect. If no one has any other questions, I'll close the session for today.